I still remember the sound of that old house breathing. The soft creak of the floorboards beneath our feet, the hum of the ceiling fan that never quite stopped wobbling, the smell of Mom's cardamom tea drifting from the kitchen. It wasn't just a building, it was the heart of our childhood. So when my brother called one morning and said, "I sold it," my heart stopped for a moment. He said it like he was talking about an old car, not the place where we grew up. It was just sitting there, collecting dust, he added. I wanted to yell at him, to remind him that some places aren't meant to be sold, only remembered. But I didn't. I just sat there in silence, feeling something sink inside me. He needed the money. I understood that. Life hadn't been kind to him lately, divorce, debts, everything piling up. But still it hurt. The house wasn't his alone to sell, yet he did it without even asking me. For weeks I couldn't bring myself to drive by. Every time I passed the street sign that led to our old lane, I'd take a different turn. Until one day curiosity got the better of me. The for sale board was gone, replaced by a shiny car in the driveway. New owners had already moved in. But as I parked across the street and looked at the house, an old memory struck me, something buried deep in the back of my mind. The floorboards. The loose ones near the window of our old room. I froze. Did my brother forget? Because what we hid under those floorboards wasn't just junk. It was something that could change everything. The next day I couldn't focus on anything else. That thought kept gnawing at me, the floorboards. It had been more than 20 years since we'd hidden it, but I could still remember the exact spot. The second plank from the left, under the window where sunlight always fell in the afternoons. Back then we were just kids. My brother Daniel was 12 and I was 9. We had this secret box, a small wooden chest Dad used to keep his old watch in. After he passed away, Mom said it got lost. But we knew where it really was. We hid it together, promising never to tell anyone. Inside were old letters, Dad's army badge, a few photographs and something else. Something Daniel swore we'd never mention again. When I parked outside that house again, my palms were sweating. I wasn't even sure why I was there. Maybe I just wanted to see if the floorboards were still there. Or maybe I wanted to know if the new owners had found it. I walked up to the porch. The new owner, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, opened the door when I rang the bell. "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you," I began awkwardly. "My family used to live here. I was just passing by and thought I'd take a quick look at the place." She smiled, the way people do when they don't really want to say no. "Of course, come in for a minute." The moment I stepped inside, every memory came flooding back. The wallpaper was new, but the scent of old wood and time still lingered. My eyes went straight to the corner of the room, to the floor near that window. And that's when I noticed it. The second plank was still slightly raised, just like before. She hadn't fixed it. I felt a strange chill. Daniel had sold the house. But he hadn't told anyone what lay beneath those boards. And if what I remembered was still there, then the secret we buried wasn't gone yet. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes I saw those floorboards, and what lay beneath them. Part of me told myself it was just childhood nonsense, that the thing we hid didn't matter anymore. But another part of me knew better. Because what we buried that day wasn't just sentimental, it was dangerous. I called Daniel the next morning. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "When you sold the house, you didn't check the old room, did you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Why would I?" I swallowed. "Do you remember what we hid under the floor?" He laughed nervously. "Come on, man. We were kids. You really think that box is still there?" His tone was too light, too fake. That's when I realized something. Daniel did remember. He just didn't want to talk about it. After a pause, I asked, "You didn't tell the new owners anything, right?" He hesitated. "No. Why would I?" Then he hung up. That call left a pit in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I could hear it in his voice, the tension, the guilt. Later that evening, I decided to drive back. The street was quiet, the house glowing softly from inside. Through the window, I could see the new family sitting for dinner, a woman, her husband, and a little boy who reminded me of myself at that age. I knew I shouldn't disturb them again, but I couldn't walk away either. I waited until the lights went out and the house fell silent. Then I stepped closer, my shoes crunching against the gravel. The memory of that loose floorboard kept replaying in my head. Because beneath it, in that small wooden box, was the one secret that had torn my family apart. And if someone found it now, they wouldn't just uncover the past. They'd uncover the truth we buried with it. I parked a little down the street, engine off, heart pounding. The night air was cold, the kind that makes everything sound sharper. The rustle of trees, the faint chirp of crickets, even my own heartbeat. I stared at the house for a long time, trying to convince myself to leave. But I couldn't. Not after remembering what was inside that box. I slipped around the back fence, careful not to make a sound. The moonlight helped me see just enough to find my way. Every step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking straight into the past. I found the window that led to our old room. It was cracked open slightly, maybe for ventilation. Just enough for me to slide it upward. The smell hit me first, that same old scent of dust and polish. The moment I stepped in, I felt like that 9-year-old kid again. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, landing on the wooden floor where we once sat cross-legged, whispering secrets. I knelt down near the window and ran my fingers across the floorboards. My hands were trembling. The second plank still had that faint looseness to it. I pressed the edge and it gave way with a soft creak. Dust rose into the air as I pulled it up. Beneath there was a hollow space, small but deep enough. My heart was hammering so loud I could barely hear anything else. I reached in. And there it was. The same wooden box. The same faded carvings Dad had made on the lid, initials of our family name. I hadn't seen it in over 20 years, but it looked exactly the same. Untouched. Forgotten. I lifted it carefully and set it down. My hands shook as I brushed away the dust. I hesitated before opening it, staring at the faint scratches across the lid, the ones Daniel made that day when we buried it. When I finally lifted the top, the smell of time hit me. Inside were the old letters, the faded photographs, and the small black envelope. The one that changed everything back then. The one Daniel swore we'd never speak of again. My hands froze above the box, hovering over that black envelope. It was smaller than I remembered, the paper brittle, the edges curled from age. For a moment I just stared at it, afraid to touch it. Memories came rushing back. Daniel's pale face the night we hid it, Mom crying in the kitchen, the police car parked outside with its lights flashing through the rain. I was too young to understand it then, but old enough to know something terrible had happened. I picked it up carefully. The faint scent of smoke clung to it, old, almost forgotten, but still there. My name was written across the front in my father's handwriting. I felt a sting in my chest. He'd been gone for over 2 decades, but his pen strokes were still steady, still alive on that fragile paper. I unfolded the letter inside. The ink had faded, but the words were clear enough to read. It wasn't long, just a page, but every sentence hit like a hammer. He was confessing something. Something about the fire that destroyed his workshop, the missing documents, and the debt he couldn't repay. But there was more, a line that made my breath catch. If anyone ever finds this, know that Daniel was not to blame. It was me. I read it again. And again. My father had taken the blame all those years ago, but now this letter said otherwise. The truth was different. Daniel had lied. He wasn't the innocent victim I'd thought he was. He was the reason our father lost everything. I sat there, shaking, the letter trembling in my hands. All this time, Daniel had made me believe Dad's death was an accident, that guilt had driven him. But now, sitting in our old house in the middle of the night, holding that letter, I finally knew the truth. My brother had sold our home for cash. But what he had buried under these floorboards was his guilt. I don't know how long I sat there. The air felt thick, like the house itself was holding its breath with me. That letter trembled in my hands, its truth cutting deeper the longer I looked at it. For years I carried this ache for my father, for what I thought was his weakness, his failure. But now I realized he wasn't weak. He was protecting Daniel. The sound of a car door slammed outside, jerking me out of my thoughts. I quickly folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. The headlights swept across the room. Someone had pulled into the driveway. My heart jumped. I crawled toward the window, careful not to make a sound. It was Daniel. He stepped out of his car, looking around nervously, then started walking toward the back door, the same way I came in. I froze, my mind spinning. How did he know I'd be here? Had he been watching me? The door creaked open, and there he was, older, thinner, with tired eyes that didn't hide the guilt anymore. For a moment, neither of us said a word. The silence between us was heavy, filled with everything we never talked about. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, his voice low. I stood, clutching the box against my chest. "You remember, don't you?" He looked away. "Of course I remember. That's why I sold it." That hit me like a punch. "You sold the house to get rid of it? To bury this all over again?" He didn't answer, just rubbed his forehead the same way he did when he was a kid caught lying. "You think I wanted any of this? You think I didn't live with it every single day?" His voice cracked. "Dad wrote that letter because I made him. I thought hiding it would make it go away." I stared at him, the brother I'd trusted, defended, missed. The truth was uglier than I'd imagined. "Then why come back?" I asked quietly. He exhaled, his shoulders sinking. Because I knew you'd find it. And if you did, you'd finally see who I really am. His words hung in the air, raw and heavy. I could barely process them. My flashlight cast long shadows across his face. The same face I grew up looking up to, now hollow and worn from years of guilt. He took a few steps closer, his boots creaking on the same floor we once raced across as kids. You think I didn't try to fix things? Daniel said, his voice shaking. After Dad died, I tried to make it right. But everything I touched just fell apart. What did you do, Daniel? I asked, my throat dry. He looked at the floor, then back at me. That night, the fire at the workshop, it wasn't an accident. I was the one who caused it. The words hit me like a cold wave. You, what? I was angry, he said. Dad was going to sell his tools to pay off a loan. I thought he was giving up. I thought he didn't care about us anymore. I knocked over the lantern when I was yelling. The fire spread before I could stop it. His eyes glistened. He covered for me. He told the police it was his fault. Said he left the lantern burning. I felt my legs go weak. All those years I spent thinking Dad was careless, that his mistake ruined us. It had been a lie. A sacrifice. You let everyone blame him, I whispered. I was a kid, he said, his voice cracking. And after he died, I didn't know how to live with it. So I buried the letter. Buried everything. Selling the house was supposed to end it. I shook my head slowly. But you didn't end it. You just locked it away until someone else paid for it. He closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. I know. For the first time in years, Daniel looked small, like the boy he used to be. Not the man who betrayed me. Not the brother who lied. Just someone broken by his own past. But something still didn't make sense. If he came back tonight, what was he really looking for? Daniel didn't answer right away. He just stood there, the glow from the flashlight trembling between us. His eyes darted toward the box in my hands, then back to my face. You shouldn't have opened it, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Then why come here? I asked. If you didn't want me to find the truth, why follow me? He sighed, his breath visible in the cold air. Because I knew once you read it, you'd hate me. And I couldn't let you leave without hearing me out. I felt anger rise in me, but underneath it was something else. Confusion, sorrow, even pity. You had 20 years, Daniel. 20 years to tell me. You let me believe Dad was careless, that he destroyed everything. And now you show up here expecting what? Forgiveness. He shook his head slowly. Not forgiveness. Just understanding. I stared at him. The silence between us was thick, interrupted only by the faint creaking of the old house settling around us. The same sound that once comforted me now felt like a warning. Daniel walked over to the window, looking out toward the dark street. When I sold this place, I thought I could finally start over. I thought if I let it go, maybe the guilt would go with it. He turned to face me. But every night I saw Dad's face. Every time I looked at my son, I saw the man I betrayed. Something inside me softened just a little. Maybe because I could see the pain etched into every line of his face, the years of silence, the weight he'd carried alone. Why tonight? I asked again quietly. He took a deep breath. Because the new owners called me this morning. They found a loose plank near the window. They said something was hidden underneath and they wanted to know if it was mine. I felt my stomach twist. Daniel looked at me, his voice breaking. I came back before they opened it, but it looks like I was too late. The room fell silent again, except for the faint ticking of the old wall clock the new owners must have hung up. Too late. Those words echoed in my head as Daniel stared down at the box, his hands trembling slightly. For the first time, I noticed how old he looked, older than his years worn by regret. I swallowed hard. You were afraid they'd find the letter? He nodded. Not just the letter. There was something else in there, something I added after you stopped talking to me. I frowned, my chest tightening. What do you mean? He rubbed his face with both hands. A document. The last one Dad signed before the fire. The one that proved the loan wasn't in his name. Was mine. I forged it. My heart nearly stopped. You forged it? He nodded again, his voice hollow. I thought I could fix things, that if I got the money I could pay him back later. But when the fire happened, everything burned except that letter. The guilt, it never went away. So I hid what was left. I thought if no one ever found it, maybe I could forget too. He looked at me, eyes glassy. You weren't supposed to know, okay? You were just a kid. I wanted you to remember Dad as a good man, not as someone who suffered because of me. I didn't know what to say. My mind was spinning, part of me furious, part of me broken. The truth had shattered everything I believed about my family. You ruined his name, I said quietly. And you let me grow up hating him for something he didn't do. Daniel's shoulders dropped. I know. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I could see the pain in his face, but I couldn't feel sympathy, not yet. Then, before I could speak again, a sound came from the hallway. Soft footsteps. Daniel's eyes widened. Someone's awake, he whispered. We both froze, staring at the open door, the dim light spilling from the corridor. And then a small voice broke the silence. Who are you? A boy, the new owner's son, stood there rubbing his eyes. The boy couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, the same age Daniel and I were when we first hid that box. He stood there in his striped pajamas, blinking at us, his small hand gripping the doorframe. For a moment, neither Daniel nor I moved. We must have looked like ghosts in his house, intruders caught in the middle of their own past. Daniel slowly raised his hands, trying to calm the boy. Hey, it's okay, buddy, he said softly. We used to live here. We were just visiting. The boy frowned. My mom said no one's allowed in after dark. Before I could respond, we heard footsteps from down the hallway, hurried, panicked. A woman's voice called out, Ethan? Are you okay? The mother appeared seconds later, her face tightening as soon as she saw us. She froze, clutching the boy's shoulder. Who are you? What are you doing in my house? I opened my mouth trying to explain, but words stumbled out awkwardly. I'm sorry. We didn't mean to scare you. This used to be our home. We just wanted to look around. Her eyes darted to the box in my hands. You broke in, she said, her voice rising. Daniel stepped forward, his palms open. Please just give us a minute. There's something under the floorboards that shouldn't have been left here. I swear we're not here to cause trouble. She looked ready to scream or call the police. I couldn't blame her. To her, we were two strangers standing in her living room at midnight, holding a dusty wooden box. Then the boy tugged her sleeve. Mom, he whispered. That's the box I found. Her eyes flicked to him, then back to us. Her voice softened just slightly. You mean this was buried here? I nodded. Yes. A long time ago. She hesitated, still wary but now curious. What's in it? I glanced at Daniel. His face was pale, his lips tight. The truth, I said quietly. About what really happened in this house. For a long moment, nobody moved. The woman stared at us, torn between fear and pity. Then she said, You should tell me everything. And just like that, we sat down, strangers and ghosts, ready to unbury the past one last time. We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Mom used to serve us breakfast before school. The woman, whose name I soon learned was Claire, sat across from us with her son leaning sleepily against her arm. The box sat in the center of the table like a relic of some buried sin. The air was thick with unease, but also something else, anticipation. Claire folded her arms. You said there's a truth I should know. If it involves my home, I deserve to hear it. Daniel exhaled slowly. His eyes darted between her and me before he began. 20 years ago, this house belonged to our parents. My father was a carpenter, built half the furniture here himself. One night, there was a fire in his workshop. Everyone thought it was an accident, but it wasn't. Her expression softened with curiosity. Go on. I watched as Daniel's hands trembled. I caused it. I was a stupid, angry kid who thought I knew better. My father took the blame. He lost his reputation, his clients, and eventually, his will to live. When he died, we found a letter, a confession. I buried it here with everything else that reminded me of that night. Claire looked stunned. Her son's eyes widened, but he didn't seem scared, just fascinated, the way children are when they sense something real and tragic. Daniel's voice cracked. I sold this house because I couldn't bear the memories. But when you called about finding the box, I knew I had to come back. To face what I ran from. She stared at him for a long time, then at me. So you came back to make peace with the past? I nodded. We didn't mean to trespass. We just needed to see it one last time, to make sure what was buried didn't stay buried in silence. Claire sighed and looked down at the box. You can take it. Whatever it is, it doesn't belong to this house anymore. Her voice was gentle, not angry, not fearful. Just tired. Daniel nodded, his voice almost a whisper. Thank you. But as I picked up the box, something inside rattled. It wasn't just the letter. There was something else, something neither of us remembered putting in there. The sound was faint but unmistakable, a metallic clink, dull and heavy. Daniel and I exchanged a look, both frozen in the same thought. When I'd lifted the box earlier, I'd been too focused on the letter to notice it. Now that noise felt almost alive, like the past refusing to go quietly. Claire noticed our hesitation. "What is it?" she asked softly. I set the box down again and slowly opened it. The hinges creaked. Inside, beneath the old letters and ashes of time, lay a small metal key wrapped in cloth, tarnished with age, yet still glinting faintly under the kitchen light. Daniel frowned. "That wasn't there before." I looked at him sharply. "You're sure?" "Positive," he said. "We never had a key. We only buried the letter, the photos, and Dad's badge." Claire leaned forward. "Maybe your father added it later?" But something in my gut told me that wasn't true. I picked up the key, feeling its cold weight against my palm. There was a tiny tag tied to it, faded and frayed. Written in my father's old handwriting were just 3 words. "For when ready." Daniel's eyes went wide. He must have added it after the night I buried the box. I stared at the key, my mind spinning. For when ready, it wasn't just a message, it was a test. Maybe Dad knew one day we'd come back. That we'd have to face the truth, together. Claire tilted her head. "Do you have any idea what it opens?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Maybe, the old workshop." The word sent a chill through me. The workshop had burned, yes, but the brick storage shed behind it was still standing, though sealed shut for decades. I looked at Daniel. "You think he left something for us there?" His jaw tightened. "Only one way to find out." Claire's son yawned and she gently stood. "It's late. Whatever this is, maybe it's time to finish it, and let this house rest." I nodded slowly, slipping the key into my pocket. We thanked her quietly and stepped outside. The night air felt colder than before. The street was still. And as we stood there under the porch light, Daniel said the words that sent a shiver down my spine. "Let's go to the shed." Daniel's face drained of color. He took a shaky step back, the flashlight trembling in his hand as its beam danced across the dusty walls. "Both of us?" he repeated, his voice tight, almost panicked. "What is that supposed to mean?" You couldn't have." I shook my head, but a strange unease crept up my spine. The air inside the shed felt heavier now, like the shadows themselves were pressing closer. "I don't know," I said quietly, unfolding the letter completely. My father's handwriting filled the page. Neat, deliberate, familiar. "My sons, if you're reading this, then I didn't have the chance to say goodbye. I want you to know I forgave you both long before the fire. We all make mistakes when we're young. But the truth must never die with me." My hands went cold. "Both of us." Daniel leaned in. "What truth? What mistake?" I swallowed hard. A memory flickered, faint, distant, of that night before the fire. The smell of kerosene. The way Daniel shouted at Dad. The way I'd run into the workshop crying. But there was something else too, something I'd buried so deep I never dared to look at it again. I whispered, "He wasn't alone in that workshop." Daniel stared at me. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "I was there, Daniel. I came in after you left. I was scared he'd throw your stuff away, so I tried to move the lantern back onto the shelf, and it fell." He froze. The silence that followed was unbearable. The truth hit both of us like a slow, crushing weight. All these years we'd blamed him and each other, but the truth was that we both caused it. 2 frightened kids. One moment of anger and fear that burned down everything. Daniel dropped to his knees, hands over his face. No, it can't be." I knelt beside him, my throat tight. He knew, Daniel. That's why he forgave us both. He looked up, tears in his eyes. "All these years, we hated each other for something we both did." I nodded slowly. "And he carried that guilt alone, to protect us." The shed went silent again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. For the first time in 20 years, the truth had finally come home. Daniel and I stood in the shed, both staring at that letter like it could still change the past. The words blurred in my mind, "I forgave you both." They echoed louder than the night around us, louder than the crickets, louder than my heartbeat. Daniel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "All this time," he whispered, "I thought I was the only one carrying it." I nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why we both ran from this place. It wasn't just guilt, it was the memory of what we did together." He let out a shaky laugh that wasn't really laughter. "I spent years blaming you for judging me when the truth is, you didn't even remember your part." I looked at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. Maybe I didn't want to remember. Maybe I needed to believe one of us was innocent. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel reached out and closed the trunk. "He forgave us," he said softly. "It's time we forgive ourselves too." Outside, Dawn was beginning to color the horizon, faint pink and gold creeping over the rooftops. It felt almost poetic, like the house was exhaling after decades of holding its breath. We carried the box out together. The cool air brushed against my face, carrying the scent of wet earth and something lighter. Peace, maybe? At the back fence, Daniel stopped. "What do we do with it?" he asked. I looked at the box one last time. "We keep the letter," I said. "And we burn the rest. Let the past rest where it belongs." He nodded. We set the box down on the damp grass and I struck a match. The flame caught quickly, licking through the papers, the photos, the guilt. For a moment, the firelight reflected in Daniel's eyes, not in fear this time, but release. When it was done, we stood there watching the smoke curl into the pale morning sky. The past was finally gone. But the memory of our father's words stayed, not as a wound, but as a promise. The truth must never die with me. And now, it never would. Daniel and I stood in the shed, both staring at that letter like it could still change the past. The words blurred in my mind, "I forgave you both." They echoed louder than the night around us, louder than the crickets, louder than my heartbeat. Daniel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "All this time," he whispered, "I thought I was the only one carrying it." I nodded slowly. Maybe that's why we both ran from this place. It wasn't just guilt, it was the memory of what we did together. He let out a shaky laugh that wasn't really laughter. "I spent years blaming you for judging me when the truth is, you didn't even remember your part." I looked at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. Maybe I didn't want to remember. Maybe I needed to believe one of us was innocent. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel reached out and closed the trunk. "He forgave us," he said softly. "It's time we forgive ourselves too." Outside, dawn was beginning to color the horizon, faint pink and gold creeping over the rooftops. It felt almost poetic, like the house was exhaling after decades of holding its breath. We carried the box out together. The cool air brushed against my face, carrying the scent of wet earth and something lighter. Peace, maybe? At the back fence, Daniel stopped. "What do we do with it?" he asked. I looked at the box one last time. "We keep the letter," I said. "And we burn the rest. Let the past rest where it belongs." He nodded. We set the box down on the damp grass and I struck a match. The flame caught quickly, licking through the papers, the photos, the guilt. For a moment, the firelight reflected in Daniel's eyes, not in fear this time, but release. When it was done, we stood there watching the smoke curl into the pale morning sky. The past was finally gone. But the memory of our father's words stayed, not as a wound, but as a promise. The truth must never die with me. And now, it never would.